Introducing Philipp Pointner, Chief of Digital Identity at Jumio, a leading digital identity verification platform that helps you verify and detect fraudulent identities and transactions online. Philipp, welcome to the show, my man. How are you?
Thanks for having me on the show. I'm great. I'm great.
Good stuff. Where are you in the world at the moment?
I'm based in Vienna in Austria.
Absolutely nice. You are my first guest based out of Vienna. Lovely. Hopefully not
I'm
the
honored.
last. Yeah, yeah. We're struggling with the cold in the UK at the moment, man. So I am brave in a t-shirt, but I've got a coat next to me if it gets a little bit. Is it similar over where you are?
Yeah, it's cold, but we're
Yeah,
used
yeah.
to it. Like it's a normal winter and not these warm ones that we had over the last years.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, Philip, let's dive straight in. Before we talk about Jumio, though, I really like to understand a little bit about your career and how you got into the industry.
Yeah, so I mean I'm in product management, and for me, even as a kid, I was always fascinated by the inventor type characters in the cartoons and in movies and whatnot. So I wanted to be that. And then at some point I realized, well, product management, this is the modern way of solving complex solutions and inventing stuff. And it's not so much the tinkering in the garage anymore that we do nowadays. So software is now solving problems. And then I ended up working for a company where I was in charge of a product where we had to do KYC, know your customer checks on people.
Hmm.
And so I was aware of how painful that is. And, we had fraudsters trying to breach our security measures and whatnot. And so when the opportunity came to work at Jumio and solve that problem as a service to companies so they don't have to care about identity anymore, I knew that would be a successful adventure. And I've been here for almost 12 years now.
I was gonna say, yeah, you're what, 12 years in.
Yeah.
When you joined Jumio, what was your role initially when you first landed there?
So the idea was really to head the product management function and bring good product management discipline into the company. Up until that point, it was, software developers writing requirements for other software developers. And so we wanted to kind of get the customer perspective in and build a good product management practice. And I then was the chief product officer for the first 9 years at Jumio. And I've handed over that role to Bala, who joined us about 2.5 years ago, or maybe even 3 years ago. And my new role now is this chief of digital identity role, where I future-proof Jumio for the world where identities are no longer pieces of plastic, but bits and bytes that live on our mobile phone eventually.
Yeah.
And then the other big area that I look after is data analytics for fraud fighting purposes. And so that's, I think, a little bit where we're going to go
Yeah, yeah,
today.
nice. What for those that don't know, what is your digital identity specifically?
So the idea of a digital identity is that you don't have a physical passport or driver's license anymore, but it's a digital representation either of these documents, or it's something completely new that the government gives you, that you can use to verify who you are in the real world and ideally also online, in a way that identity theft hopefully is reduced or at least significantly limited.
I looked on just for some statistics around identity fraud specifically, and I saw one that said 33% of Americans have been a victim in the past, which I found was just incredibly high.
Yeah,
Um,
it's insane. And it's especially in the US because they have special use cases around, tax returns and whatnot, where it's really profitable to successfully impersonate somebody. But the problem really breaks down into multiple categories. And so you have fraudsters that try to really specifically impersonate somebody they're going after. So they want to be somebody specific. But that's the rare case. The vast majority is the fraudsters want to be anybody but themselves, right? And so they want to create an account under a fake name. They want to create access to services under a fake identity. And so it's either completely made up or they steal someone else's. but they really don't care who they end up being as long as it's not themselves. That's the normal case usually.
Yeah. Who are the fraudsters? Is this like individuals, or is it like more APT type stuff?
It's interesting. We see, so sometimes we can, pinpoint attacks and where we have multiple fraudulent attempts against one of our customers. Sometimes we can pinpoint it back to a single individual. More often now, and this has been evolving over the last 3 years or so, it's really organized rings of small rings of like 20, 25, 30 people that will work together and try to open as many accounts as they possibly can in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah. What exactly are Jumio doing then from a platform perspective? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that will...
Yeah, so really what we do is we take part in the onboarding most of the time of a new user. So we say we turn strangers into customers. And so the idea is that we take a look at the government issued ID, we take a look at the face and see if that matches the photo on the ID. We analyze the ID document to see if it's authentic. And we also have a range of other services on our platform that can be added to that, like a phone number risk, an email risk, device fingerprinting, and other things that help in the area of putting the good people on track to become happy customers and keeping the fraudsters out. That's mainly the purpose.
Got it. And why is it important for enterprises to be thinking about having platforms like Jumio in place?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally companies have been looking after this themselves, right? And so you would have a floor full of people that, where document forensics, they would look at document submissions that came in via email or via an upload on a website or whatever. And companies used to run these operations themselves, but it doesn't give you the flexibility, the accuracy, and also the scalability that you need as an expanding business. Because if you want to onboard twice as many people per day, you suddenly need another floor in the building. And so if you work with somebody like Jumio, you can just say, starting tomorrow, I'm going to send you twice as many transactions, and that's fine. So that's one. And then the other is kind of just the global context. So you can run such an operation when you, let's say, you only look at UK passports and driver's licenses, and you can become an expert in that. We are supporting, globally over, 195 different countries with, I don't know even how many different variants of documents.
With the adoption of generative AI and AI ML now, I imagine over your 11 years that you've been with Jumio, it's evolved a lot. Specifically recently, how are you guys using AI to safeguard like identities of users?
Yeah, I mean, it has evolved on both sides, right? And so we're in this arms race with the fraudsters. They are using generative AI now also very successfully.
Yeah.
And deepfakes and other techniques. And so we use AI to fight AI. We're essentially creating models that can detect these types of generated fake documents, but also most of the time it's about the faces, the fake faces that don't exist in real world. But in general, the entire approach in those last 11 years has changed so much, right? And so in the beginning, there were, from a coding infrastructure point of view, there wasn't the tooling, and there wasn't like these kind of turnkey solutions that you have today, where you throw in the data, you get out the model. I mean, I'm oversimplifying. My colleagues in development, they would kill me if I talk like that. But in terms of, so it was much harder, 11 years ago as it is today to come up with good solutions. And a while back now, really the machine has outpaced the human in the ability to detect some of these fraudulent activities, especially everything around deepfakes. We did a survey among normal citizen survey, not special user groups. And we asked people if they are confident that they would be able to spot a deepfake. And, over 60% said, yeah, absolutely. We're super confident that we can spot a deepfake. And then when you actually, test people's ability, it's not there. It's just, it's become so tricky to spot. And you have all kinds of techniques. So some of these images are just generated from scratch, so that person never existed. Sometimes you have a real person's face that gets face swapped onto someone else's ID photo, for example. So the background, the clothing, the hairline, all of that stays the same, but the eyes, the nose, the mouth are inserted. So there's all kinds of techniques that the fraudsters are using now, and it has become automated for them as well.
Mhm.
So when we talked to fraudsters in the past, they would tell us, yeah, to craft, a high quality, very sophisticated fake ID document, it would have taken them, 45 minutes to an hour to do one. And now they just hit the generate button and they get 10,000s of these documents. And so that's the evolution we're dealing with.
Crazy. How are you guys like identifying patterns then? What sort of patterns are you picking up?
Yeah, so that has become really important also, to kind of have a tool against these larger fraud ring attacks. And so there is, as you can imagine, there are just reference. So if we find the fraud, and then we can link other transactions to that fraud because they come from the same device, so they use the same document number, or they use the same first name, last name, date of birth combination, or whatever. That helps us, and that is just very simple, a lookup of what have we already seen. Where it gets more interesting are these attack patterns where, we can say, oh, if we get these 12 transactions in individually, they might look as if they're good transactions, but if we look at them together, we can actually see the attack pattern forming. We can see that there are some faces repeating, but there's a different name every time, and so there's these kind of things that we can do. And then last but not least, what has become very important is this behavioral analysis, and not in the sense that biometrics are using it, where it's, how do you type, or how do you lift your phone out of your pocket, but in the sense of what is the velocity of that identity. So the prime example I always give is, if I use my driver's license in May and I use my passport in September, that's perfectly normal citizen behavior, right? If I open 5 bank accounts on the same day, that's just clearly not, what you would expect. And so these are the things that we can see. And meanwhile, also, we have the legal frameworks in place to look at that also across customers. And that has been a really powerful addition.
Yeah, if you're opening 5 banks, you must have a lot of money to be banking.
Yeah.
So on the complexity bit of it all, so your obviously platform's getting more and more advanced, but from a fraudster's perspective, particularly they're utilizing AI, etc. now to develop, how much more sophisticated are their sort of attacks becoming then in like businesses specifically?
Yeah, and I don't mean to paint a misleading kind of picture here. We still have a lot of these kind of, low energy, low criminal intent cases where, it's a kid that wants to get access to, a site that sells vaping products. And so they take dad's identity and they try to pass their face for their dads. And so that's still to be taken serious. That's, for the protection of minors, that's an important use case. But I'm just saying, it's not like there is a big financial stake there where people are stealing money, or there's money laundering or terror financing or whatever happening. And so usually these attempts are very easy to spot with the naked eye, very easy to detect also by machine learning algorithms. And so there are some very obvious things that we see.
Yeah.
So that's one end of the spectrum. And then it goes all the way to the other end, where you have picture perfect fake identities, and you need to have more context. You need to run additional checks around it, and analyze, the images themselves, and really go into the more sophisticated kind of parts of the immune system of the ID, in order to detect the fakes, and a normal human, wouldn't be able to see it.
Yeah. From a financial perspective, like how costly could this be for an organization or person in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, the businesses we serve, they carry all kinds of risks. So there is regulatory risk. And so if you have the regulator breathing down your neck saying you have to comply with money laundering, you have to run a proper KYC process, you have to know who your customers are, you might lose your license, or you might get, significant fines that put you out of business, if you're not following that procedure. We had several cases now in the media where the big crypto companies got fined in the US because they weren't running their KYC processes properly and whatnot. So those are, big money at stake. Then you have other cases where it's about the individual transaction. So we have car rental companies that come to us, and yeah, they let you rent a BMW, and then if you drive it off and are never seen again, then the value of that car is just gone, right? You have peer-to-peer cases where people are, renting out places or renting out expensive photo equipment to other individuals, and that might get stolen or trashed or whatever. So there could be all kind of different reasons. You have promotion abuse is another big one. So let's say you're a sports betting site, and you say if you sign up now, you'll get, £100 or €100 or whatever on top of what you pay in. That's great for fraudsters because they just create 10,000 accounts and they will take all your money. And so there are so many avenues to actually having a financial gain. And then there's also the whole business of anonymous or kind of fake bank accounts where you can just go and sell them on the dark web. So this is a real, this is a day job of, I'm gonna create bank accounts and credit cards and whatnot in a fake name, and then sell them on the dark web to other actors that do whatever with it.
Yeah, it's scary, mate, when you think about it. I know you've been on your website, you're quite clear about who your customers are and sort of the partners that you've got on board. Is there any data or statistic you can give around how you have prevented a certain amount or amount of fraud, or any cost? Is there any sort of data around it of how the platform has helped?
Well, that's an interesting. I don't think we've done the math in that way. But so we have about 35 to 40 million fraudulent IDs that we know that we caught, right? And so we believe that puts us only second to the Interpol lost and stolen travel document database in terms of just size of fraudulent IDs that we have on file. And so if you attribute, I don't know, 700 or 1,000, euros or dollars or whatever to each of these cases, which is a number that we've gotten from our customers on an average, what the fraud is worth to them, then you get quite a large number.
On the deepfakes front, how are they being created? Are they just tools that are very easy to access, or?
Yeah, so there are more and more now. There are tools that you can just find in the internet and just have running in your own environment, or even websites that do that. And especially around the face swapping, right? And so there are two use cases really. You can, if you plan to use your own face, which is bold, but in some countries we see that. If you plan to use your own face, you'll take someone else's ID and you'll Photoshop, or you'll face swap your own face onto the document. Or it's the other way around. You try to take whatever photo is already on the ID and you face swap it onto the selfie. But when we record the selfie, it's not just a single image. We actually take a short video, and there's a liveness detection mechanism there that makes sure we're not dealing with a piece of paper or a screen or whatnot. And so in order to defeat that video, you have to have some sort of a camera injection. So you have to run a live video feed with the swapped face that will then also like follow your own face movement and your mimic. And so that's really, you know, from a tech perspective, you have to put more effort into getting something like that up and running.
Yeah. Wow. It's crazy. What about the future for this particular digital identity space? Like, you've obviously seen it evolve over the last 11 years with Jumio specifically. Like, what's
Well, I mean, I think so. First of all, this brings us back to like this evolution from plastic to digital. I think we're gonna see a big movement on government issued EIDs, and so we have the EU digital identity wallet coming out, you know, later this year, beginning of next year. Imagine you have 350 EU citizens that are running around with a digital identity in their pocket, and they don't need to carry a plastic anymore to identify themselves. And so that will change the fraud landscape, because now you will have to somehow social engineer your way to that user or hack that phone, or like that. It's going to be different. You can't just recreate that digital identity because it's cryptographically secured and it's supported by you know, certificates that are owned by the government. And so that's going to be a big level of evolution. And then otherwise, I think just this, we're at the beginning of this generative AI arms race. And what we haven't seen yet is the full scope of scamming and kind of social engineering into stealing someone's identity. And so previously, you know, people were trained that, oh yeah, if you get these emails and you spot like you know, spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes, that's a hint that that's a. Now with ChatGPT, or there's Fraud GPT, I can tell you about that in a second. These are just, you know, perfect messages, and they are so much more in tone of what you would actually get from a telco or from your bank or whatever. You will have people getting phone calls with voices that they are familiar to them, that are generated in a way or another. And so I think as citizens, we will all need to become way more educated and more aware of how these generative AI tools are gonna facilitate the scamming.
Yeah. What's Fraud GPT? Is that
Yeah,
is it a
so
website or
so fraud, this is fascinating in many ways. So fraud GPT is a large language model like ChatGPT that has specifically been trained for the purpose of operating but also creating new scam operations. And so not only will it come up with, you know, the sequence, but you can then also connect it to an inbox, and it will go back and forth with the victims.
My God.
Yeah, I mean, if you imagine like for a fraud ring or like a fraud operation, they would send out 100,000, 500,000 emails to potential victims. But then when somebody writes back, they have to manually respond to these, and then they got the person on the hook, and they have to kind of have this communication, and they need people to do that, right? And so what I learned not long ago is that many times these people are going to be people that have been abducted and trafficked and forced to do this kind of labor in Southeast Asia. And so in some ways, this Fraud GPT is great, because it means there's less people needed to operate these kind of scams. But at the same time, you can imagine the scalability just becomes infinite, because you can now send it out to as many emails as you want, and you will, you know, be able to respond to everything in almost real time. So Fraud GPT operates it, but it also creates new scam schemes from scratch. It's fascinating. And the other part that I found so entertaining about this is it's actually operated as a SaaS model. So it's available on the dark web, but it's not a one-time purchase. So it's not just free to use, but you actually have to have a monthly subscription, which I found very, very interesting.
Wow. Well, Philip, thank you for scaring me a little bit, but also from an educational perspective, it's a super, super interesting space, and obviously wish you the best of success with Jumio. Anything you'd like to finish up on, or?
No, I think we are in this arms race. We're doing what we can to stop the fraudsters. So far, quite successful. And yeah, we'll see what the future brings.
Absolutely. Well, wishing you the best, my man, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed today's show, please like and share with your friends and colleagues, as this is really important for the show's reach. If you'd like to be our next guest or are interested in Aspiron Search's staffing solutions, please get in touch directly with me or reach out to us via our website www.aspironsearch.com.